Viewers and listeners, I am with the co-authors and co-editors of the book, Somebody Should Do Something, How Anyone Can Help Create Social Change. This book was published by MIT Press, and a copy can be accessed on the link that is right in the description panel on the upload for this video. Gentlemen, let's get to continue. I'm going to get you to do a lot of talking. But you must know that we love it. Our student audience is loving it, and it's of our great benefit. So I want you to talk a bit about the chapters. I want you to take me through what is in the chapters and how you structured it. You can all, speak about, particular aspects, however you want to structure it. It's totally fine.
I'll give you the really quick overview, and then maybe Dan and Alex can take the details wherever they want.
Okay.
So the book has three main sections. The first section lays out the problem of either or thinking, which is the problem of thinking that the way to make change is either to just worry about your own personal choices in isolation of other people, or to just somehow change the system directly. The resolution of that is, as we mentioned before, what we call both and thinking, and so we lay that out at the end of that first section. The middle section of the book dives into questions about why we're susceptible to either or thinking, and really what it means to think both and instead. And then the third section of the book makes it practical, lays out lessons and tools for would-be change makers about how to go about building coalitions, motivating their community to make change, implementing change when it has already been started, and so on.
So I'm happy to talk about some of the chapters in the middle part, which are in some ways closest to my heart. So like Michael said, the second unit or section of the book is where we start moving away from our diagnosis of how thinking about social change can go wrong, and kind of we're invited to think about it in terms of these two opposing camps of structures versus individuals. And it starts to build up a better picture of how we should think about social change. And some of the chapters there, we have a chapter on thinking about racism as a habit of thought, where we profile Patricia Devine, who's a psychologist, who's done a lot of work on implicit bias, and particularly standing up workshops that people, when they buy in and engage in the aims of those workshops, can sort of gain a perspective on and maybe eradicate some of their own biases. But we focus both on that, but on how Patricia Devine was an individual who helped build up this infrastructure and put it out there in the world such that other people could enter into it and then help them reorganize themselves in ways that make their behaviors more in line with their considered values. So we use that to illustrate kind of an interaction between individuals and the structures that they can enter or create on their own. And then from there, we sort of dive into a more theoretic picture of what human nature is like, which touches back to a point I made just a moment ago about how when you're thinking about issues in terms of social change and practical ideas on how to create it, it gives you a different perspective on certain kinds of research which is out there in the world, which might not itself be specifically about social change, but you can read it through that lens, and it has some really interesting lessons that you can draw from it. So we have a chapter on sort of the contemporary view, which is I don't know if it's the orthodoxy yet, but it's certainly on the rise and being taken very seriously, and I think very promising, that human nature is just like completely and utterly social. In fact, it's like our involvement with each other, our reliance on each other, is part of what shaped our minds to be these sort of unique and incredibly powerful problem solving devices that we are. We're interconnected with each other in ways which is very easy to miss given the culture of individualism that we live in. But again, the sort of scientific picture of human nature is showing how social we are. And that has one side of it, like we're extremely interrelated and interdependent because we're so susceptible to social influence. But if you look at it through the lens of social change, what that also tells us is that we are all just like natural born agents of change because we are emitting social influence basically all the time. We're just sort of seeping it out of our pores, even if we don't realize it. So sort of scientifically vindicating this picture of like, even if you don't think you are an agent of change, and what you're doing has these ripple effects which go out in the world that you might not even realize. Understanding that better, sort of understanding this picture of the science of human nature, actually gives you some resources and can deepen your understanding of what you can do as a social agent. And then in the next couple of chapters, we chase out some more specific implications of that. We have a chapter on how to think about social norms and the way that we tend to calibrate our behaviors based on what we see people around us doing and what they think. We're always kind of monitoring each other's behavior and taking stock of what's popular and what's weird. And again, this just happens naturally all the time. It's one of the ways that social influence is just the water that we swim through. And then the last chapter in that section, we take an even further step back and talk about the system dynamics of sort of communities and even larger cultures and societies, and how incredibly hard it is to predict when those are going to go through these tipping point sort of changes, but also making the point that we know they do go through these tipping point changes. The dynamics of social change, they can be gradual, and then they can go through a big shift. We don't know how far or close we are to those sorts of big shifts, but we know they happen. And so the message there is kind of, we need to be epistemically humble, but there should be a kind of hope in that as well. Things can seem very dark, but we could just be one more straw on the camel's back away from some shift in a positive direction.
So after that core center part of the book where we sort of lay out our theory about how we think human beings and social dynamics work, in the remaining chapters, we kind of try to walk step by step through movement building and social change. So we have a chapter about the importance of social movements. We have a chapter about the importance of social identity to social movements. We talk about the importance of coalition building across identities. We dive deep into thinking about the specific sorts of psychological and cognitive skills that are necessary for becoming the kind of person who wants to work in solidarity with other folks and can identify structural problems when they see it. We also have a chapter talking about a particular kind of pitfall that can happen with social movements, where you pass the new bill, you cut the ribbon, you topple the statue, you have the big flashbulb moment, and then you think your work is done and you check out. And we talk about instead the importance of actually following through and implementation and ensuring that once policies are put in place, we have real action. And we conclude with a chapter on social roles and talking about all the different kinds of social roles that individuals can occupy when they're trying to bring about change, whether it's something pretty small, such as the contrast between NIMBYs and YIMBYs. So NIMBYs are folks who say, oh, I'm all for social change. I'm based in Southern California, where NIMBYs might say, oh, I'm all for building more housing, affordable housing, but I don't want that large apartment complex in my backyard. That would be, ruin the aesthetics of my neighborhood. And we talk about the contrast between NIMBYs, many of whom are folks who are maybe retired and have a lot more free time and are able to show up at the community event to protest against development. We contrast those with YIMBYs, folks who say yes in my backyard, folks who care about trying within their communities to build up structures that can support social change. Most of the book is focused on the American context, because that's the context that we know the best, and also because we're trying to fight back against individualism, and the United States of America is probably the most individualistic country in the history of the world. But we do at times try to broaden out the perspective. So one person that we profile specifically in our chapter on social roles as someone who perhaps your audience might be more familiar with than most folks in the United States, which is Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, who is at this point probably less known than her son, Fela Kuti, who was a very popular and influential musician. But his mother, Funmilayo Kuti, when she first started out trying to make the world a better place, she was always kind of oriented towards helping others. But initially, the way that she thought about that was trying to help market women who were selling their wares in the market, sort of help them move up the socioeconomic ladder, teaching them literacy skills and etiquette, trying to help them as individuals do better. But over time, working with them, she saw the different ways that they were oppressed by the colonial situation in Nigeria. And so she eventually became more radicalized. And so while she initially formed the Abeokuta Ladies Club, she eventually transformed it into the Abeokuta Women's Union. And it was no longer just about helping individual women rise up the existing system. It was about changing the system. And we'd sort of describe the incredible steps she went through to organize folks, bringing tens of thousands of people out in protest. Of course, she eventually made enemies after Fela Kuti's album described Nigerian soldiers as zombies. That didn't go so well, and they stormed the compound, and she was thrown out of a window and broke her hip, and was actually, unfortunately, died not long after that. But shortly after she died, the kind of struggle that she was invested in for advancing women's rights culminated in universal suffrage for everyone in Nigeria. So she's a really impressive figure of someone who started out having a kind of individualistic perspective, but then was able to leverage her social roles to build a movement and make really important change.
That's really great. Thank you very much for that. As you were doing the presentation, I was already thinking about the last segment, which is that of our target audience. From looking at the book, I'm drawn to want to believe that you may have had a specific target audience when you were writing it, but it seems like the message appeals to everybody. The message seems to be a message that is important for almost everyone. But I'll give you an opportunity to just explain to us how you conceptualized the target audience of this book.
Well, I hope you're right. We would definitely love it if it speaks to lots and lots of people. That was by intention. I mean, in the sense that we didn't want to only speak to people who share our political priorities. I mean, of course, we want people working for justice and not against it to take up the tools that we talk about. But we really do think that the ideas are relevant to social change entrepreneurs of all different kinds and in all different cultures and countries. So really, the only sort of bar for entry is that you care about something, that you see some injustice out there and you want to do something about it. And I think our imagined reader is somebody who perhaps feels a little stuck, a little paralyzed by the feeling of what can I do as a single ordinary person. And I think that we've got some things to say that can help people get unstuck. Beyond that, like Alex said, while most of our examples are rooted in American politics and 20th century history and sort of more recent, I really do think there's something there for everybody.
We would love it also if folks also taught the text in their classes. So we do think it's something that is accessible for non-academics, but one of our hopes is to try to build up more academic resources on our website. More academic articles that you could pair with our text, discussion questions, syllabi, and so on. We, again, having been teachers for several years, there are so many topics that I've taught that I know would be so fascinating to my students, but then you go and try to read the academic articles. This is especially a problem in philosophy. I'm not sure how much of a problem it is in history and other fields, but in philosophy, sometimes what could be a very straightforward, simple, clear to read paper is full of Latin phrases and symbols, and it's just way less accessible than it needs to be to convey the point. And all three of us teach at big state institutions. We have a wide range of students, and so our hope is that our book could be a really useful entry point where you're first encountering these ideas in the context of stories in an accessible format, and you could pair that with some of the more difficult abstract stuff.
That is great. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making the time, for coming to the book series to speak about this book. I'm very much happy to have heard you. Viewers and listeners, please do not forget to click the link that is right in the description panel so that you can get to have access to this book. The primary case might be the United States, but conceptually, I think, gentlemen, the ideas that you raise in this book are ideas that have an appeal that is beneficial to the rest of the world. This is why we want to encourage that as much of our viewers and listeners get to download a copy of this book. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making the time. Have a wonderful good day.
Thank you
so much,
Dr. Chikumbu. We're really grateful for the opportunity.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.